Welcome everyone, Simon here from the Whales of Wall Street. We have an EnergyWeb video for you guys today. EWT on the exchange. Again, another project that we are absolutely fascinated by on the Whales of Wall Street. Very much the excitement around energy sector and blockchain utilization is phenomenal for the years to come. We've made it no secret in the videos that we've done, whether it be EnergyWeb related, Power Ledger, a couple other chains that are really heavily orientate around this sector as well, how much monetary value this is really worth. We do have a video coming up in January with Dr. Vivek from Power Ledger. It's going to be absolutely fascinating to talk about the artificial intelligence principles and the utilization of blockchain integrating together for the energy sector. So keep an eye out for that one. But for this topic in particular, we're going to be talking about aviation fuel. Now, there's a couple of reasons or pathways into this particular conversation, one of which is around the ESG aspects that are dominating headlines over the last year and in the years to come. This is around the environmental sustainability goals, all these kind of things, a big push from the World Economic Forum, the Agenda 30 programs of the United Nations, etc. So we talked about it in previous videos very briefly in the financial markets and just business in general as to how ESG can really affect companies if their ESG goals are not correctly presented or confirmed to the general public or in their balancing books, etc. And on top of that as well, not hitting certain targets within the environmental aspects that everyone needs to try and adhere based on all these crazy organization events like COP28, for example, and all these environmental flowing events that keep pushing these narratives. And it's no different really in the aviation sector. We'll go through a couple of articles first and foremost, leading on from EnergyWeb's recent-ish announcement of SAF, so the Sustainable Aviation Fuel certifications, the transparency, the validation, the processing of those, which ultimately really involves blockchain and the ability of like the smart contracts and things like this. So there's a good topic here, and as always, I like to bring in the data, I like to bring in the monetary value of these markets and these opportunities, not just the price points of the tokens. We really, as investors, or whether you're new or existing to the crypto world, you need to understand, first of all, the utility of these tokens. And when you've got that defined, you need to also understand what actual like industry and sector are these kind of companies or projects involved in. So let's go straight into the browser and we'll kick this off. Before we do, don't forget to smash that subscribe button if you have not done so already. Plowing through the numbers, like way over 12,000 now, heading towards 13,000 so quickly. Thank you so much for the support, and keep shouting about Whales of Wall Street to your friends and family as we get closer to a potential bull run towards that mid to end stages of 2024. This is a prime opportunity in these coming months to educate ourselves and understand what we are trying to be investing in. So, got that out of the way. Let's talk about this. So, we have spoken previously, very briefly, about the SAF certifications, but going back to that point I was made a minute ago about why blockchain is used in these instances, of course, for the validation, the processing, and particularly the transparency to ensure that we as consumers or users, and in this instance, perhaps a passenger, when we are looking at ESG goals and targets, and certainly in that consumer level, and it will filter down to us, we will have to make responsible decisions ourselves and expect the companies that we are having services provided to us by or services that we choose to pick. We need to ensure that those companies are also adhering to sustainable levels and sustainable targets moving forward as well. So we have all this validation opportunity in front of us. Now, these certifications they're not something massively new. They've been around for a bit of time. However, the incorporation of blockchain and this next development of this scenario is where it gets quite exciting and very interesting in this aspect. Now, some people will argue, not necessarily morally, but whether we do things sustainably or not, there is always a question around like exactly how sustainable is this? Like at the end of the day, we're still producing emissions regardless, but we can try and do something at least at the bare minimum to try and help from where the sources come from, and of course help in the best ways possible technologically to try and enhance these methods of producing oil, gas, fuel, etc. All of these things that we use for energy in one way or another, right? So the aspect of this, and this is kind of a bit of a background here, guys. So new independent, not-for-profit Sustainable Aviation Fuel Certificates, SAFC, registry launched today at COP28. So this is back in December the 6th. This is a couple of weeks ago. I have only just got the time to speak about this. Supporting major consumers of air travel and transport in their efforts to help directly decarbonize flight with an enterprise-grade digital tool. This is the utilization of EnergyWeb and particularly the EWX platforms as well. So we mentioned here, the registry was created by clean energy non-profit RMI and the Environmental Defence Fund, which we'll talk about in a bit more detail in a second, in collaboration with the Sustainable Aviation Buyers Alliance, I mean, there's a lot of abbreviations there, and digital solutions developer EnergyWeb. So a great combination of organisations, and particularly with the interaction with EnergyWeb moving forward in this initiative, which is absolutely phenomenal to see this. So I'm going to throw out these articles first and foremost, so we have a bit of an understanding about what actually is this market and why we're doing this. So this is really interesting. So by 2030, $30 billion worth of SAF market is due to be in front of our eyes. So that's a 30-fold increase by 2030 from around today's dates, if you like. So an analyst has calculated a rise of 538 million litres in 2022 to 18.2 billion litres in 2030, which is absolutely amazing, really, because we have lost a lot of airlines over the last few years. And we know that since the pandemic, when there was that trickling effect of more aviation coming back in, I don't know if any of you have Flight Radar, the Flight Radar app on your phones. If you haven't looked at it before, try and maybe have a look at the at least the free trial or something, because you can see where all the planes are live across the world all the time, even like the small planes, small commercial, small passenger planes. So you can see the altitude, speed, whatever, and their routes. And I found it fascinating because before 2020, I remember the company I used to work for, we were sitting around the table at lunch and I said, have you seen like Flight Radar? And literally you couldn't even see the countries, especially in Europe. You couldn't see it. You couldn't see the map because there's so many planes. And obviously when you zoom in, they're a bit more spread out, but it was absolutely staggering. And since that 2020 mark, yes, more airlines came back into fruition. A lot of died off or whatever, and not necessarily just because of the pandemic, but also things that sort of catered more after that as well. A trickle effect. But I look at it now and I don't see near as many planes as I do when I did see a few years ago. Now, why are the reasons behind this? As I said, we've mentioned a couple of the variables on there, but the principle here of these statistics is absolutely staggering. Considering this momentum. Now, I know that more planes and more sustainable planes are being built, so that could be a reasoning why they think that will increase further. And of course, the ability and the ease now, we've got things like digital identities coming into play. We've got biometric terminals that we will have to go through, particularly in the EU. So the UK is obviously not part of the EU, but if we go to the EU, I think as of next year, we have to have our fingerprints as a minimum, and facial recognition, I think, has been used anyway for a long time. But in the public eye, not many people knew that. So we've got all these things that will make things more accessible, more easier for us to transport ourselves through customs, blah, blah, etc., and potential cost reductions because of the use of blockchain within those facilities as well. So there's loads of accommodative factors as to why actually outside of that remit of more planes being built, why there might be more transportation and more travel going on. So it could explain these number increases, but it just seems to me like absolutely phenomenal amount. And I know the populations grow all the time as well, but yes, the compound annual growth of 55.3% and estimate the SAF market's value to reach $30 billion by the same year, up from $1.1 billion last year. I mean, that's phenomenal, isn't it? Absolutely phenomenal. And that in the instance gives you an indication of how powerful this SAF market is in general. So we're not suggesting that $30 billion is coming into EnergyWeb, but we do know that EnergyWeb is very heavily integrated in a systematic format with other companies and organizations to provide a solution that creates that transparency, the validity of these things, and the aspect of smart contracts and digitalization of contracts, which is a huge topic in itself, is being incorporated in this as well. So we have this like really interesting story building, and this is something that's very, very heavily focused. I just mentioned about the UN's narrative of Agenda 30, or the sustainable actions for 2030, and the World Economics forefront of this information as well. So this is, I'll leave a link to this in the video after we've finished here. But yes, the Sustainable Aviation Fuel Certificate Emissions, Accounting and Reporting Guidelines. Absolutely huge document. I've got as far as about page 25, ran out of time, but it's absolutely fascinating read, guys. Honestly, if you're into aviation, or you have an interest in like the fuel aspect, or just general interest in what we're investing in, or oil, whatever, fuel, how that's produced, how it's going to be changing over the years, this is the document you really want to read. It's absolutely phenomenal. Like, I mean, there's a lot of people that have contributed to this. There's a lot of research in terms of where they got a lot of this information from and gathered it collectively. But it is absolutely fantastic to read. And I'm not saying I'm a massive advocate of World Economic Forum. I think many people know my positions on these things. However, you cannot ignore that whatever pretty much they say goes, and these things are coming whether we like it or not. And therefore we prepare ourselves, or our mindsets, to go, okay, well, if we're not going to win this battle, how do we become a part of it potentially in an investment perspective? And that's why I like looking at these kind of things, these kind of white papers. It's really intricate detail. So I'll leave that in the end of this one. But looping this back around to that whole sustainable aspect, there's a lot of pressure worldwide, and particularly in the business world, the institutional world. We've seen fines, heavy fines, in the millions upon millions of dollars towards banks about ESG goals. You think that they might get away with it, but they have indeed been fined significant amounts of money for not hitting targets, or misrepresenting their targets, or supposed validated numbers in these reports that they deliver on an annual basis. So ESG is a really powerful topic, guys. If you don't know much about it, I definitely recommend reading up on it in a bit more detail. But yes, the environment, society and governance aspect, for me personally, this is a bit of an evolution from what I used to have to deal with heavily about 10, 12 years ago with, I think, the CSR, corporate social responsibility. Is very similar, but it didn't really have a massive attachment to any kind of fines or specific targets. It was kind of like a marketing tool to say that you're at least thinking about being responsible of recycling and your environment and packaging and where you're getting supplied from and to, etc. But it's taken it to another level. And it is, as I said earlier in this video, the representation of those organizationals, conversations and conferences that are out there that all these crazy people attend, and big leadership influencers out there, of course, Elon Musk and whatnot, attending these summits and conferences, gives it that extra element of confirmation that we really need to take note of this. And there's a lot of money in this area. Let's not kid ourselves. It's not just about everyone trying to look moral and look like they're fully caring. I'm sure hopefully most of them do, but ultimately there's a huge money shift going on in the green energy sector. There's a lot of greenwashing narratives around at the moment, and all these things going on in the background. So it really is fascinating, but looping it back into here gives that extra emphasis as to why this is so important. So we've got the ESG aspects, we got the aspects of really needing to identify and have that transparency of these certifications, not just for these companies to release themselves and show that they are sustainable, but for us as users and passengers, we will have to adhere and accommodate ourselves within these things as well. So it's really important. And look at this. This was an article again from earlier in this month. Virgin Atlantic became the first commercial airline to fly across the Atlantic Ocean using 100% sustainable aviation fuels, demonstrating the incredible potential of clean alternative fuels for flight. So it mentions here we need more planes flying on SAF, hence my point earlier about trying to figure out how we're getting so many more planes. But now thinking about it, in the concept of this video, we're talking about it at the same time, that makes sense. We're talking about the shift of money. Well, they may produce more planes to accommodate the fact that money could be made in these areas quite substantially. And then ultimately, it's just the passing of contracts and the passing of money back and forth to make these things happen. It's how the money and the world goes round, right? So it kind of makes sense in my head now as I'm reading through this. Wasn't expecting to learn things as I was going along. So hopefully that triggers in people's minds out there to maybe think about something I'm missing here. But that could be another reason for sure why we feel that those fuel numbers and those airline numbers will increase significantly to 2030. And of course, confidence in markets and things will play its factors as well. So there's some really big stuff going on here, guys, about this. And I'm just going to pull this up. This is a really interesting article from BP, British Petroleum, how all sustainable aviation fuel feedstocks and production technologies can play a role in decarbonising aviation. Now, I'm not expecting electric planes. I think some people have tried that and it's failed miserably because you can't fit enough solar panels on there. You can't charge them long enough. And the last thing you want is the battery depleting itself in midair, right? So there's loads of things going on about the sustainability or the sourcing of how fuel is made. So there's loads of ways that's done. Oils and fats, sugar and cereals, can believe it, solid waste, and of course things like wood, agriculture reduce, and renewable energy in general. So the 5 main feedstock families have different constraints, loads of different reasoning as to why they are used or not used, and how we can become more sustainable in the harvesting, the promoting, the production, and the logistics side of that. And then that associates cost and things. So there's cost association problems, as well as the production and the solution itself. So really interesting to see this breakdown. Again, I'll leave this in the descriptions as well. But look at this, first generation alcohol to jet. Like, this is all crazy stuff. Fatty acids, Fischer-Tropsch, I can't remember how you spell it, Tropsch maybe, from municipal solid waste. So there's loads of really interesting biomass and biodegradable aspects here of how they can be sustainable. The market is huge. And as I said, there's a lot of greenwash narratives out there, but there equally are some technologies and advancements in understanding of resource, of how we can make the world better from the emissions perspective and the climate perspective, whether we believe it or not, of this whole entire narrative in general. The whole point loops back to this entirety of the fact that there is a market, there is problems, there are solutions, and EnergyWeb is part of one of those big solution areas. But you can see here there's some really interesting aspects of the SAF certifications, huge banks, orientations around this, insurance companies, of course. There's so much involvement here from the monetary side. It's absolutely staggering. But really interesting as well to see the incorporation of all these other companies involved too. We talked about RMI, the Environmental Defence Fund as well. So big companies. This is obviously from the website Environmental Defensive Fund as well. You see that the articles have come out in similar times. There is an argument, I might need to do a bit more digging, that EnergyWeb has helped this facilitation of this Virgin flight potentially. If it is, I will be updating the title for sure, because I think that's a great thing to shout about. But again, look at this, EDF. We know EDF is a huge partner of EnergyWeb, and it's all looping around in its own ecosystem. And I've always felt that EnergyWeb is so advanced in this sector, in this industry. It's absolutely phenomenal to see the continuation, the progress. Of course, a lot has gone on in the background with EnergyWeb as well. There's a lot of talk around their movements around the EWX platform, the worker nodes, etc. I mean, I don't know if anyone's seen it yet or not, but the aspect of having to stake your EWT or etc. tokens to be able to work on these worker nodes, I think there's a minimum of like 3,000 on there. So that's big monetary value, but it shows the seriousness of where this chain and this solution is going, and how they're really trying to involve as many people as possible at these top levels of developing and stuff, the C-suite, etc., to really push this drive forward. So it's a really exciting time. Hopefully we've all learned something along the way in this video. As I said, I'll leave the links in the descriptions, but for me, it's all about finding pockets of information, pockets of sectors that these chains and these projects are working within, and understanding the monetary market values of them, and understanding the pathway to this as well. It's not going to happen overnight. And a lot of people keep saying, not just on our channel, but other channels, I see it everywhere. Why is the price low? If it's so big, why is it so low? Why aren't more investing in it? Trust me, people are investing in it slowly and surely, but ultimately you're not going to see humongous prices, in my opinion, to around 2025 to that 2030, especially the ones related to the ESG formats, energy in general, and even the finance market ones. You know, we're so early still. You could say we're early, the people that came in 2012 and 2017. Yes, I'm in a group of relatively new investors, but I still understand that there's a good 6-7 years ahead of us minimum to take advantage of this opportunity of understanding, educating ourselves, researching further these different sectors and areas and how the application of blockchain and technologies can adhere to these areas. So it's absolutely massive. I'm really looking forward to seeing that developing further over the years to come. So on that note, guys, let's look at the EWT price on the chart. So currently floating around about the $2.21 mark. It has had a good move since October. So October is referenced to here. That was around about my birthday. And then we've got a movement up to around $3.18. So it's not as big as previous moves where we saw, big bull runs, etc. in the past. But it's a good indication that people are starting to listen. And when those announcements and things do come out, there is excitement and movement in the volumes, etc. So really good to see that. I'm just going to remove this previous price range. For those that didn't see the previous video, this was just indicating how much further we've got to try and hit the potential new all-time high in the next bull run, where people were suggesting that we could at least hit the $50 mark. It's a good 3,500% increase take. And before we just remove this, I'm just going to put it up to its previous all-time high. So that's still from this current point, or roughly around this current point, a good 1,000-ish% move to go. So plenty of gain opportunity there. But let's just drag it back into the reality of the recent times. I'm just going to move this down to here as well and get a bit more of a spectrumed fib retracement level movement here. So I'm just going to put it up to the nearest point so we're a bit more up to date on the data here. So we can see that we're currently playing around with this longer term fib retracement level, marked at around $2.39. So it's not too far off that current price point where we see down here at 223. Sorry, I'm just going to utilize this one so I don't have so many fib levels going all over the place. So I'm going to take one of the recent high points and one of the recent low points here, and you can start to see that we're really focusing in on these specific areas. So as you can see, we've had a bit of a bounce off of this fib level. It's quite interesting when this happens, isn't it? If you literally taken it to that previous high here back on the 9th of December, a few days after that announcement, and taking it from one of the most recent low points, I'm just going to make sure that's accurate. You can see it clear as day. It's absolutely fascinating. I always love looking at stuff like this. So we're bouncing around this current area. And there's an argument to say that we may have this kind of float effect to retest lower areas underneath that, or a bit of a wave effect around this, so we get some stability. That will allow the RSIs on the bottom left here to consolidate themselves a tiny bit more. I don't think it's needing to be too much, because the 14 days on 37, that's relatively quite low. That's a good, in my opinion, and what I do personally, that's a good manual position opportunity for DCAing. But for the longer term spectrums at 46, I would like to see that at least around 42, 44. And I do think we'll probably see that over the coming days, if not the next couple of weeks, where I do believe we'll see a stabilized line around here. Now, there's two ways about this when we go from that, and it's relatively common sense. We would potentially come down to retest this $2 area. There is an argument to say we should really try and do that because we have a massive lack of data under this barrier of the 218 mark, or let's use this fib retracement level, for example, at 216. If we follow that 216 mark all the way back here, you can see there's some action around here in September. There was some action around May 2023, but then before that, was way back here in July 2022. And even to that point, there is nothing underneath here other than this area here. Now, there's two reasons why this may float above this, is that there's more confidence in EnergyWeb than there ever was before. There's more institutional value. There's more just general holders in general in this particular asset class. But in general, I still think there will probably be some sort of crash in the next few months, whether it's around the halving event, the ETFs, whatever, buy the rumors, sell the news, whatever narrative you want to use, interest rates, etc., etc. That might come one day, and that might be what pulls us down to this area of $2 again. I think it has a strong momentum at that area because the lowest it came down to was $1.50. Will we retest that area again? I think it's partially unlikely. It's definitely possible, but I think that within that remit, it's going to take a lot to drag it down to that particular area. And if I just pull this back down to one of these defining fib retracement level areas, again, you can argue the fact that one of the lowest positions that we could retest before that lower area is the 170. So My mindset at the moment is I have got some capital at this $2 mark anyway. I'm actually possibly looking potentially at that 179, 178 mark to get that dip down that lower fib, just in case it comes in. I'm not going to put a huge amount there. I might even do it manually nearer the time, to be honest, because I think for it to drag from its current price point down to there, it's going to have to be a significant reduction in the whole entire market, a big crash. And in fact, let me just quickly throw in perhaps a price range just to give a bit of indication as to how much we need to come down by. Now, some are arguing that we might see a 30 to 40% reduction in the next crash. And I'm not saying there is going to be one, but I always anticipate these things just in case. So there's an argument to say that actually that is possibly realistic to try and get back down to those levels, because that only takes us down to around 28% I do, however, say that in previous corrections across the market, EWT tends to not reduce itself too much. It doesn't go massively in line with the rest of the market. So there's a bit of a skewed data point there, or a skewed narrative. So we just have to play it as it comes, in my opinion. But the secondary point of that is, if we do bounce around this area, there's no reason why we couldn't come and retest that higher area again. If you're a big trader or volumist of the EWT token, that might be a significant jump for you to make some good profits. Of course, the staking pool is finished now as well. Still waiting on a bit more news on that as to what the next phases are for there. So pretty much this drop here is accommodated by the fact that the news came out, profits have been taken, but also people are taking money out who may be chasing other things like the Solana race, or perhaps just holding that cash back for any movements in the markets downwards in the near future. There's loads of reasons behind that. Let us know in the comments below what you've been doing with EWT the last couple of weeks or last few months. I'm holding still for a bit. I do some manual positions in certain areas, especially around these areas where I see the RSIs stabilizing. I think that's important. But at the end of the day, I'm a long-time holder. I am excited about the potential of reaching that previous all-time high all the way back up here, which is 14. No, it was higher than that. Sorry, $23. So we've got a long way to go on that marker. But I do anticipate, really, but in 2025, when more announcements around the ESG aspects go in and the energy sector has more understanding with blockchain, that we could hit these higher numbers. That 36 mark is definitely achievable, in my opinion. Anything higher than that, we'll just have to see as it comes. But people are suggesting that this is a $200, $300 token in the next few years. We'll have to see. We're not a predictive channel as such, other than the fact that we try to give our best opinions, for a better word. It's not financial advice, of course, of where we think things are going and why. We're not just picking numbers out of random. We have data behind this, algorithms, but also the variables of which happen in the real world infrastructure as well. So things to touch on here, guys. Very interesting topic, as always, in my opinion. Hopefully you've enjoyed this. Smash that like button. We'll catch you in the next EnergyWeb video. Thanks for watching. See you soon. Bye-bye.